Mazen Myers. How did a minor Agaran tribe and then a minor Agaran kingdom turn into the powerhouse of Northern Europe? At its peak, the Khandat Empire was one of the largest empires in human history, but nothing can last forever, and when it fell, many of the small Sasanian tribes in Northern Europe quickly moved in to fill the power vacuum created in Agar. But this video isn't long enough to fully cover all of that history, so let's just summarize it. Koivia Superior was one of the frontier provinces, governed by Servius Falx. Calix Falx, brother of Servius Falx, was serving as a legate under him. The Mazen tribe, along with two others, were heavily settled in the province by this time, but Servius decided to drive them out, ordering Calix to escort them to the nearby city of Echinay. However, expecting resistance, Calix sent a portion of his army eastward in the night to ensure safe passage. The Mazens saw this and misinterpreted the movements as a betrayal, massacring the camp, including Calix, and fled to the nearby province of Iambia, governed by Decius Otto, who had a different opinion of their settlement. Angry at the unjust death of his brother and half a legion, Servius ordered the entire tribe to be put to death. Decius disagreed and defeated Servius in battle. He then granted a portion of the territory of Koivia Superior to the Mazens and annexed the rest into Iambia. After securing his power in the region, Decius himself declared independence, marking the beginning of the end for the Khandat Empire. In the following years, the northern frontier proved too weak to hold back invasion, and the emperor proved too weak to exert his will over the provinces. By 570, the Khandat Empire was officially dissolved, leaving Decius's coalition as the last remnants of the empire in Agar. With Decius's coalition now controlling a solid foothold in central Agar, you can imagine that Decius must have been very happy. But not all were content with Decius's leadership. Servius Falx, humiliated by his defeat and the death of his brother, had fled south, gathering support from local tribes and exiled nobles. By 573, he returned, convincing Calus Vicentius, the aging governor of Petusia, to support his claim to restore the true order. Calus was not a fool, but age had made him wary of instability. Servius promised a united front, peace through submission, and return to imperial authority, but with Calus as the new emperor. For Calus, this was not about the old empire. It was about his legacy. He agreed. At the same time, Mazen settlers in northern Iambia began expanding, pushing into border towns and farmland, backed quietly by Decius himself. While Decius had championed the Mazens' right to settle, he was also using them as a tool to absorb nearby territories without openly declaring war. These settlers clashed repeatedly with the border patrols of Loren and Haimo, two minor kings from the fragmented Isan kingdoms who viewed this encroachment as invasion. In 575, Loren's brother was killed during a border skirmish. Loren retaliated, burning two Mazen villages to the ground. Meanwhile, Servius Falx returned to the north with Calus Vicentius' endorsement and a mercenary force funded by southern nobles. He declared the formation of the restored Khandat Dominion, claiming to bring peace to Agar. In 582, the Battle of the Narathas Forest pitted Decius' forces against the combined armies of Servius and Calus. It would be a bloodbath. 3 legions lined up on either side of the battlefield, surrounded by dense forest. After a brief skirmish, Decius marched his troops forward, making contact with Calus' vanguard. Calus had originally intended to meet up with Servius just before the battle, but Servius had shown up late. Decius' troops cut through the first rank, seemingly unstoppable. However, just then, Servius' legion arrived from the north, charging into Decius' flank, breaking morale. Unbeknownst to them, though, Decius had anticipated the move and positioned his own cavalry to guard the path just a few hours earlier. The surprise of the cavalry charging from the forest bought Decius just enough time to position his reserves to counter the new threat, barely preventing disaster. Although his position was now stabilized, Decius was now outnumbered. He needed to act fast. He hopped onto his horse and led a small contingent of his guard around the right flank, making sure that his movements were hidden. When he appeared from the forest, he was far behind enemy lines. But instead of directly attacking Calus' back line, he instead organized his infantry into a long, thin line. Calus' inexperienced troops panicked at the sight of the force approaching, Obscured by the dust, the line appeared to be a second, massive force. Caelus, too, was convinced, surrendering on the spot, while Servius would retreat to fight another day. Decius won, but at enormous cost. His coalition fell apart, and his allies began acting independently. Turning east, with the Condat collapse, the largest tribe, the Sparrow, quickly swept up most of the land east of the Isen River. But arguments over how to split it led to infighting between 7 major competitors. Berthold, self-declared High Thane of Ossen, wasted no time in claiming dominion over the western valleys. Haimo, the youngest of the rival kings, struck at Wilfrid's border garrisons with mercenary raiders, while Wilfrid retaliated by salting Haimo's fields, rendering them fruitless and sparking famine in the region. In the north, Norman, often seen as the most diplomatically minded, invited Loren and Sigmar to form a defensive coalition. But Loren, already in secret talks with Berthold, betrayed the pact before it was even signed. Sigmar, furious, declared Loren a vulture in velvet, and declared war with Norman. The rivalry among these lords came to a head in 619, when Hartmut, aligned with Wilfrid and King Odor of the Hallstrath region, launched a joint attack against the eastern towns of Berthold and Haimo. Berthold marshaled his fractured bannermen and rode east, joined by Haimo and 2 other claimants who feared Hartmut's rising influence more than Berthold's pride. They met at the highlands of Dornfell, a wind-scarred ridgeline sacred to the old Sparrowan gods. Hartmut's army was specialized for defense. Arriving at the battle, they immediately set to work chopping down trees and digging trenches. He would line his most experienced troops in the center, behind a trench and a wall of wooden stakes. When Berthold's force finally arrived at the edge of the cliff, Hartmut was still in the middle of fortifying. Attempting to seize the opportunity before his defenses were prepared, Berthold immediately ordered a cavalry charge. He quickly scrambled a small cavalry force to counter the charge and buy time while his infantry reorganized. Berthold would have to pull back. Understanding that it would be impossible to charge again, he utilized his height advantage, instead, to rain arrows down onto Hartmut. Realizing that he needed to move fast, Hartmut decided to do something quite strange. He decided to have his troops carry the defenses with them, slowly pushing them forward as they advanced up the hill. This move understandably baffled Berthold. His archers simply rained arrows on the vulnerable troops, cowering behind their shields. Haimo, on the other hand, was not nearly as calm. Panicked by the slowly advancing infantry, he decided to move his own infantry in to attack. Unable to contain Hartmut's advance, Haimo was forced to retreat or face destruction. Attempting to withdraw, the morale of the infantry in the front broke and turned into a full rout. Hartmut's troops marched forward, abandoning the defensive works, massacring Haimo's infantry. In a desperate attempt at maintaining control of the situation, Berthold ordered the archers to fire into the melee and led his cavalry into the fight. Unfortunately, in the chaos, the cavalry was unable to effectively fight, being swamped by running friendly infantry and shot by both friendly and enemy arrows. In the aftermath, Hartmut claimed Berthold's lands in the name of the East Ager crown. The remaining rival kings, exhausted from war, offered nominal allegiance to Hartmut in exchange for autonomy, affirming the borders of a newly unified East Ager. At the time of the Condat collapse, Mesum was a small, autonomous kingdom under the control of Decius. The king at the time, Ervald, was the 3rd son of Alric I, chief of the northern Mesum tribes, and he'd been installed more to keep him from stirring trouble than to reward competence. But trouble found him regardless. After the Pyrrhic victory at the Narthus Pass, Ervald severed ties with Decius. Mesum, at that point, possessed no standing army, little money, and less respect. Yet Ervald was no common king. He traded land for time, signing early accords with Thanberg and Verdenstal to keep their ambitions turned elsewhere. By 585, while Verdenstal clashed with Thanberg in Wolfenmark, Ervald struck. He did not send his army to conquer, but instead to aid. His troops showed up in front of starving cities, offering food, resources, and labor. When warbands came to reassert control, the locals refused them entry and raised Mazum's banner above the walls. They did not consider themselves conquered, but rescued. Within a year, Mazum's territory had doubled without fighting a single war. Alarmed, Dannenberg and Würdenstahl turned from their own war and allied once more, planning a strike through the Elmwood Pass. Erwald, already warned, had long since prepared. The narrow roads were trapped. When the allied hosts entered the highland paths, rocks were pushed down from the mountains. Entire columns vanished beneath the avalanche. Survivors limped home through knee-deep snow, trailing rumors of gods awakened in the crags. As the Mason saying goes, no man notices the wind until it takes his roof. That was a lot. Like, way too much. This video was supposed to be about a guy named Randolph. This was supposed to be like a 1 to 2 minute summary, and then I finished writing and I realized I had to push this video's topic into another video, and this is actually going to be a 3-part series, and I had to do an entire video's worth of art again, since all my art was for what this video was supposed to be about. Well, I guess you'll have to wait till next episode to learn about Randolph, and make sure to subscribe before you leave.